She did not knock loudly. That was the first thing Raymond Holt noticed. Most people who knocked on a door at that hour, past 11 on a November night with the temperature already below freezing, knocked with urgency, with the particular force of someone who needed something immediately. This woman knocked quietly, the way a person knocks when they are not sure they have the right to knock at all, when they have already decided that whatever answer comes through the door is probably more than they deserve. Raymond was 61 years old. He lived alone in a 2-story house on Crescent Mill Road in Delwood, Tennessee, a house he had lived in for 23 years, first with his wife Ellen and then, after Ellen died of a heart condition 6 years ago, by himself. The house was not large, but it was solid, built in the early 50s from good timber by a man who intended it to last. Raymond had kept it up. That was the kind of man he was. He had been sitting in the front room reading when he heard the knock. He looked at the clock on the mantel. He looked at the window. The porch light was on, as it always was after dark, because Ellen had believed in a lit porch, and Raymond had seen no reason to change that after she was gone. He set his book down and went to the door. The woman on the porch was somewhere in her late 30s. She was wearing a denim jacket over a gray sweatshirt, neither of which was adequate for the temperature. She had a canvas bag over one shoulder, the kind sold at grocery stores, packed full. Her shoes were sneakers, the wrong kind for this weather. Her hair was pulled back, and her face was the face of someone who had been outside for too long and had stopped being surprised by it. She was not crying. She did not look like someone who cried easily anymore. She looked at Raymond when he opened the door and said she was sorry to bother him. She said it first, before she said anything else, and she said it in the particular way of someone for whom apologizing had become a reflex, a thing you do before you speak, so that whatever you say next lands softer. She said she had been walking since morning and her feet were bad, and she had seen his porch light and she was not asking to come inside. She was asking if she could sit on his porch for a little while until she warmed up enough to keep moving. That was all she was asking. Just the porch. Raymond looked at her for a moment. He looked at the denim jacket. He looked at the sneakers. He stepped back from the door and told her to come inside. She said she did not want to impose. He said it was 11 degrees and she was welcome to sit on the porch if she wanted, but he would feel better if she came in. He said it the way you say something when you mean it and are not interested in negotiating. She came inside. Her name was Miriam Goss. She told him this when she was sitting at his kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. The mug he had put in front of her without asking because it seemed like the obvious thing. She did not offer more than her name at first, and he did not ask for more. He put a plate of leftover cornbread on the table and sat across from her with his own coffee, and they were quiet for a few minutes in the way that two people can be quiet when one of them is very cold and needs to simply be warm for a moment before anything else. She ate the cornbread. She said thank you. He said there was more if she wanted it. She asked if he lived alone. He said he did. She said she was sorry, in the way people say it when they mean it as more than a word. He said he had gotten used to it, which was true in some ways and not in others, and he did not elaborate. Outside, the wind moved through the trees along the road, and the house made the small sounds that old houses make in cold weather. A settling here, a creak there, sounds that had kept Raymond company for 6 years, and that he had learned to hear as a kind of presence. He asked her where she was trying to get to. She looked at the mug for a moment. She said she was not entirely sure. She said she had come from Memphis, that she had been in Memphis for 4 years working at a distribution warehouse until the warehouse closed 6 weeks ago, that she had been staying in her apartment on the assumption that something else would come through, and something had not come through, and the landlord had not extended the same assumption. She had a cousin in Knoxville who had said she could come, and she was going to Knoxville. But Knoxville was still a long way from Delwood, and she had run out of bus fare 2 stops back. Raymond asked how long she had been outside today. She said most of it. She said she had spent a few hours in a diner outside of Wartburg when the woman at the counter had let her sit without making it uncomfortable. She said she had been very careful to order something small so it would not be taking advantage. She had counted her money at the table when the woman was not looking and ordered the cheapest thing and left a tip anyway because that was how she had been raised. Raymond sat with that for a moment. He thought about someone counting money under a table to make sure the tip was still possible. He thought about what it meant to leave a tip when you were counting coins. He asked if she had eaten anything else today. She said the diner. He got up and made eggs and toast without asking whether she wanted them and set the plate in front of her. She looked at the plate and then at him and said she did not know how to thank him for this. He said she did not need to thank him. He said eat while it was hot. She ate. He refilled the coffee. Outside, the wind picked up and something rattled against the side of the house. A branch, a shutter, something ordinary. When she had finished, he asked her where she was planning to sleep tonight. She said she had seen a church about a mile back, that sometimes churches left a side door open or had a covered area. He said it was going to be 14 degrees by morning. She said she knew. She said she was not asking him for anything more than she had already asked for. She said the porch had been enough, and the coffee and the food were more than she had expected, and she did not want to keep taking. He told her there was a spare room. He said it had been his daughter's room when she was young, and it still had a bed in it that was made up because he kept it made up out of habit. He said she was welcome to use it tonight, and in the morning he would drive her to the bus station in Rockwood and buy her a ticket to Knoxville. He said it not as an offer she could take or leave, but as a statement of what was going to happen, because it was the sensible thing, and he was a sensible man. Miriam looked at him across the table. She had the careful eyes of someone who had learned to read situations quickly, who had spent enough time in the world reading strangers to know the difference between an offer that was safe and one that was not. She looked at Raymond Holt for a long moment in the way you look at someone when you are deciding what they actually are. She said she would be grateful for the room. She said she would be up early and out of his way. He showed her upstairs. The room was small and clean, a single bed with a blue quilt, a dresser with nothing on it, a window that faced the side yard, and the old oak that Ellen had planted the year they moved in. He showed her where the bathroom was. He said there were towels in the cabinet. He said goodnight. She said goodnight. She said his name, Raymond. The way you say someone's name when you want them to know you have heard it and are not taking it for granted. He went to his own room and lay in the dark and listened to the wind and thought about Ellen. Who would have done exactly what he had done? Would have had the woman at the table with coffee before Raymond had even finished deciding. Would have been upstairs looking for extra blankets before Miriam had finished her eggs. He thought about the particular way Ellen had moved through the world. The way generosity for her was never a decision, but simply a direction. The way water finds downhill without having to choose it. He had tried to keep that direction after she was gone. He was not always sure he had managed it. Tonight he thought maybe he had. In the morning he was up at 6. By the time Miriam came downstairs, carefully, as if trying not to take up more space than she had been given, there was coffee made and bacon in a pan and biscuits in the oven. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen and looked at the stove and said she had thought she would just be on her way. He said breakfast first. He said it the same way he had said everything else, without room for argument, but without pressure either. Just the simple expectation of a man who believed people should eat before they started their day. She sat down. She ate. She asked about the photograph on the wall beside the window. A woman in a yellow dress standing in a field with her arms out like she was about to catch something. He told her that was Ellen. She said she was beautiful. He said she was. He said she had also been the most stubborn person he had ever known, which he meant as the highest compliment, and Miriam smiled for the first time since she had knocked on his door. They talked over breakfast. Not about her situation, which had already been discussed as much as it needed to be, but about other things. She asked about the house, and he told her about buying it with Ellen, about the addition they had put on the back, about the years of small repairs that had become a kind of conversation with the structure itself. She asked if he had children, and he said one, a daughter named Claire who lived in Nashville with her husband and 2 boys. He asked about her, and she told him about growing up outside of Jackson, about her mother who had worked at a textile plant for 30 years, and who had taught her that the size of your effort was not supposed to be determined by the size of your reward. She said her mother had believed this completely and had lived it completely, and that was where the tip had come from. In the diner yesterday, even when she was counting coins. Raymond listened the way he listened to most things, without interrupting, with the full attention of a man for whom listening was not a passive activity, but something he brought his whole self to. He had been a high school shop teacher for 28 years before retiring. He had listened to a great many young people in that time, people who needed to be heard before they could be helped. And he had learned that the listening and the helping were often the same thing. After breakfast, he washed the dishes and she dried them without being asked, finding the cabinet where the plates went on the second try. And he noted the particular instinct of someone who understood that you contributed what you could to a space that had received you. He drove her to the bus station in Rockwood. It was a 40-minute drive through bare winter hills, the sky white and low, the road mostly empty. They listened to the radio for a while and then turned it off and drove in comfortable silence, the kind that does not require filling. He bought her ticket at the window, a one-way to Knoxville, and added $40 folded into an envelope that he had prepared that morning before she came downstairs. He handed her the envelope at the gate. She looked at it. She looked at him. She started to say something. He said her cousin was expecting her and she should have something in her pocket when she arrived. He said it was not a loan, it was not a gift with conditions, it was just money, and she should take it and not think about it beyond that. She took it. She held it in both hands for a moment. Then she said, "Raymond," and he said, "Yes," and she said, "I don't know why you did this." He thought about it for a second. He said, "Because it was cold, and you knocked on my door and you asked for the porch, just the porch, and that told me everything I needed to know about what kind of person you were." He said that the people who ask for the least are usually the ones you want to give the most to. He said Ellen had taught him that. He said he was glad he had remembered it. The bus came. She picked up her canvas bag. She stopped at the door of the bus and turned around and looked at him one more time. She did not cry. She had told herself she would not cry, and she did not. But her face did something that was more than words would have been anyway. A compression of gratitude and recognition and something older than either. The look of someone who has been seen as a full human being after a long time of being looked past. She got on the bus. He watched it pull away. He drove home through the white winter hills and went inside and made himself another cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table where she had sat the night before. He did not feel that he had done something remarkable. He felt that he had done the obvious thing, the thing Ellen would have done, the thing his mother would have done, the thing any person does when they have not let the world talk them out of their better instincts. He felt ordinary in the best possible way. What happened next came in pieces, the way things that matter usually do. 3 weeks after the bus ride, Raymond got a phone call from a number he did not recognize, a Knoxville area code. He answered. It was Miriam. She said she had arrived safely, which she had already told him in a text the same day she arrived, but she said she wanted to call because texts were not enough for what she wanted to say. She said her cousin had helped her find a temporary position at a hotel on the east side of Knoxville, housekeeping, not what she had done before, but steady, and she was grateful for it. She said she had been thinking about the $40 and that she wanted to return it when she was able. He said that was not necessary. She said she knew it wasn't necessary, that was why she wanted to do it. He said he was glad she was settled. He said to call if she needed anything. He meant it, though he did not expect her to and did not think she would need to. She called again 6 weeks after that. Not because she needed anything. She called because she had found something she thought he should know about. She had been talking to a woman she worked with, an older woman named Bernice who had lived in Knoxville her whole life and knew the city the way people who have stayed somewhere know it, in layers, with the particular knowledge of someone who has watched it change. Miriam had told Bernice about Raymond, not the whole story, but the shape of it. The porch and the coffee and the bus ticket. And Bernice had said that sounded like something worth remembering and that Miriam should write it down before the details got soft. Miriam had written it down. She had written several pages, sitting at the small desk in her cousin's spare room on a Sunday afternoon. And when she was done, she had read it back to herself, and found that the writing had done something to her, had clarified something she had been carrying around since that November night, in a form she could feel but could not name. She called Raymond to tell him she had written it and to ask if he minded. He said he did not mind. He said he was glad she was writing. He asked what she was going to do with it. She said she did not know yet. He said that was fine. He said the writing was the thing. The rest would sort itself out. What sorted itself out was something neither of them had anticipated. Miriam's cousin had a friend who ran a community blog that covered stories from across the region, human interest pieces, things that happened to ordinary people in ordinary places and that deserved to be known. Miriam's cousin shared the piece with this friend without telling Miriam first, which Miriam would not have allowed if she had known, because the instinct that had led her to ask for just the porch rather than more was the same instinct that would have prevented her from sharing the story at all. But the piece went up on the blog on a Thursday morning, and by Thursday evening several hundred people had read it, and by Friday afternoon several thousand had. The comments were the kind that accumulate when something true lands in a place where people are tired of things that are not true. People wrote about their own experiences of receiving unexpected kindness, and about their own experiences of extending it, and about the particular cost of keeping your better instincts intact in a world that regularly tests whether you still have them. A woman in Georgia wrote that she had been that person at the door once, that she had knocked, and someone had answered the same way Raymond had answered, and that it had changed the direction of her life. A man in Oregon wrote that he had been the person who opened the door once, and that reading this had reminded him of it, and that he had needed that reminder. A teacher in Ohio wrote that she was going to read it to her students. A retired nurse in Alabama wrote that it sounded exactly like something her late husband would have done, and that she had sat at her kitchen table and cried in the good way. The way you cry when something confirms what you were afraid was no longer true. Raymond did not see any of this for 4 days because he did not read the blog and did not know the piece had been published. He found out when Claire called from Nashville on a Saturday morning and asked if he had seen what was going around online. He said he had not. She read him some of the comments. He listened without speaking until she was done. Then he said he was glad it had helped some people. Claire said, "Dad, it has 40,000 readers." He said he did not know what to do with that number. She said she did not think he needed to do anything with it. She said she just wanted him to know. He called Miriam. She answered on the second ring and said she was sorry. She had not known her cousin was going to do that. She had not meant for it to become something public. He said there was nothing to be sorry for. He said he did not mind people knowing. He said the only thing that had ever bothered him about good things was when they went unacknowledged. Not for the sake of credit, but because acknowledgement was a form of continuation. It encouraged more of the same, and more of the same was what the world needed. Miriam was quiet for a moment. Then she said that was exactly what she had tried to put in the piece and had not quite gotten right. He said she had gotten it right enough. The piece settled down after a few weeks, as things on the internet do, its moment of visibility giving way to the next thing. But certain effects of it did not settle down. A woman named Lena Marsh directed a nonprofit in Knoxville that provided transitional housing and employment support for people coming out of housing crises. She had read Miriam's piece twice. What struck her was not only the kindness of the man who had opened the door, but the particular quality of intelligence the writing itself revealed. The piece was honest without being sentimental. It was specific. It understood its own experience without drowning in it. Lena had been looking for a communications coordinator for 4 months. She called the blog. The blog connected her to Miriam's cousin. Miriam's cousin gave her Miriam's number. Lena called on a Tuesday. She introduced herself and described the work. Miriam listened. They talked for 2 hours. Miriam walked out and sat at the bus stop and thought about what it meant that a night on a porch in Delwood had led to this bench on this street with this specific possibility. Opening in front of her, she called Raymond from the bus stop. She told him about Lena and the conversation. He said that sounded right. She had come to understand that when Raymond said something sounded right, he meant it in the deepest sense. Not that it was convenient, but that it was aligned with the person she actually was. She started the position 6 weeks later. She wrote pieces about residents of the transitional program, with their permission, carefully and with the specific honesty she had learned to apply to her own story. People read them. Donations came in. In March, Lena called her in and told her the organization wanted to make the position permanent. Miriam said yes. She sent Raymond a card. A paper card, not a text, because some things require the specific commitment of paper. She wrote that she did not know how to say what she wanted to say in a way that covered it, and that she had spent enough time now writing about things that were hard to say to know that sometimes the right approach was to say it simply and trust that the simplicity carried the weight. She wrote that one night in November, she had knocked on a door and asked for just the porch. She wrote that what he had given her instead had changed the direction of her life in ways she was still discovering. She wrote that she thought about Ellen's photograph on the wall and about the woman in the yellow dress with her arms out, and she thought she understood something about what he had been holding on to when he opened that door on a cold night to a stranger who had asked for the least possible thing. Raymond read the card at his kitchen table on a Thursday afternoon with a cup of coffee. He read it twice. He set it against the sugar bowl where he could see it. He looked at it for a while. He thought about Ellen. He thought about what she would have made of this, of the specific way that one ordinary decision had moved through time and found its way to this card on this table. Ellen had believed deeply and without sentimentality that every decent act was a seed, that you never knew what it was going to grow into, and that this uncertainty was not a reason to withhold the act but a reason to trust it. He thought she would have said, of course. He thought she would have said it the way she said things that confirmed what she had always believed, with satisfaction but without surprise. The way a gardener looks at a thing they planted and finds it has come up exactly as it should. He called Claire that evening. He told her about the card. Claire listened and then said, "It sounds like Mom." He said yes. He said it did. He sat on the porch that night after the call, even though it was cold, because he had always done his best thinking on the porch. The road was empty. The oak in the side yard stood bare against the winter sky. The porch light was on, as it always was after dark, because Ellen had believed in a lit porch and Raymond had never stopped. He thought about a knock that was quieter than most knocks. He thought about what it meant to ask for just the porch. He thought about everything that a single lit porch can be in the dark, what it says and what it offers and what it makes possible simply by being on. He thought about all the people who walked past lit porches without knocking because the world had taught them that asking was not safe. He thought about what it cost a person to arrive at a door and ask for the least possible thing. He thought about the specific kind of courage that looked, from the outside, like having given up on asking. He thought you never know who is out there walking on a cold night with their shoes, wrong for the weather and their bag packed and their money counted at a table when no one was looking. You never know what they are carrying or what they are capable of or what direction their life might find if someone simply steps back from the door and says, "Come inside." You keep the light on. That is what you do. You keep the light on and you step back from the door and you let what needs to happen happen. The rest takes care of itself in ways you could not have planned and would not have predicted and are not supposed to take credit for. The porch light burned. The night was cold and clear. Raymond Holt sat in his chair and breathed the winter air and felt, as he did on the best evenings of his life, ordinary in exactly the right way. Now I want to ask you something before you go. Have you ever been the person who kept the light on for someone? Or have you been the one walking in the cold looking for a lit porch? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one and I want to know your story. And if this moved something in you, if it reminded you of someone or something you needed to remember, share it today. Someone in your life needs to hear that ordinary decency still exists and still matters and still changes the direction of things. Subscribe if you haven't yet and turn on the bell. The next story is coming and I promise you will not want to miss it. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one.